All right, here we go. Today we have Lisane and Jeanine Basquiat, sisters of the legendary Jean-Michel Basquiat, who's the most expensive American painter who ever lived, and currently the co-administrators of his estate. Welcome to VladTV.
Thank you, Vlad.
I've been such a long-time fan of your brother.
Oh, thank you.
We appreciate that.
It's just such an amazing display here, and we're going to talk about that at the end. But before we start, I really want to get into the whole story of where you guys came from. So your father, Gerard, he emigrated from Haiti.
Correct.
Okay. And your mom was Puerto Rican.
Correct. From
so
Brooklyn.
You guys grew up in Brooklyn.
We did.
So what was that like?
Brooklyn in the late 60s and 70s for me, a complete melting pot. You know, growing up in Borough Hill, we first in East Flatbush and then moving to Borough Hill, there was so many. It was such a diverse group of people that that we lived around, and diversity not only in in ethnicities, but also in economics. So we really had an opportunity to grow up with different people and different walks of life. So I think that it kind of set the tone for us in terms of meeting people.
Yeah.
Okay. And Jean-Michel, he's the middle child, or
No, Jean-Michel is the oldest.
the oldest?
Mhm.
Okay, then who's the second oldest?
I am.
And then you.
Baby, yes.
You were the baby. Okay. So what was he like when you guys were younger?
Jean-Michel was fun. He was a lot of fun. Brooklyn, as Jeanine was saying, was very, it was just fun. It was like, it still to me feels like the center of the universe. Jean-Michel was mischievous. He was adventurous. We played outside a lot. Just kind of going out. Prospect Park was always very close to where we lived. So we would go to Prospect Park, Grand Army Plaza, the Brooklyn Museum, the Botanical Gardens. Brooklyn is very much about riding your bike and roaming the streets and skateboarding and doing all those fun things. Hopscotch and skelly.
Handball,
lots of handball. Jean-Michel was very adventurous. He was a funny kid, meaning that he would come up with all kinds of pranks and mischievous, creative ideas. And we just had a lot of fun. Freeze tag, hide and go seek, like all that stuff.
Okay, and from what I understand, your mom was the one that really took you guys around to the art museums and galleries and everything else like that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, not so much galleries, but she definitely was the one who, took us to the Botanical Gardens and to the Brooklyn Museum. Jean-Michel was a member. His membership card is in the exhibition. And, but we extended into the city and went to, Museum Natural History, Planetarium. She really instilled creativity in us. And, it was an important part of our lives.
Well, in 1968, your brother was hit by a car?
He was.
Okay, and he had really serious injuries.
He did.
Did he have his spleen removed? Or?
His spleen was removed. He was in the hospital for over a month. He was on his way home for dinner, crossing the street, and the car came around the corner and hit him. And I think it was a really pivotal point in his life because it's, at 8 years old to get hit by a car and to kind of watch your body have to heal through that, I think was a big thing for him. And you can see that theme in a lot of his earlier works.
Well, I looked it up. When you have your spleen removed, the average age of survival is like 6.5 years.
That's right.
So did he have like health issues from that, like
He did
moving
not.
forward? No. Oh, so he
He
fully
did.
recovered.
He did.
Oh, so maybe since he was a kid, maybe the body was able to.
Yeah, I
kind of
think
bounce
so.
back.
I know that there is some, from what I understand, the spleen has something to do with your immune system also. So,
Right.
But he was, he wasn't sickly. He was very healthy.
Okay. And while he was in the hospital, your mom brought him a copy of Grey's Anatomy.
She did.
Correct.
And then did that get him sort of kind of into like the human body and all the different organs and everything else
did.
like that?
It did.
Okay.
Yeah. Jean-Michel was he would gobble information. He loved information. And so getting that book and others really helped him to kind of explore the world and, his own body. And as you can see, again, another theme in a lot of his works is the human body.
When did the drawing start? When do you remember him starting to doodle and really start to
really,
Always.
always really young.
Always.
There was a point where, and there's a video here in the exhibition where he did these little drawings and kind of did stop motion where you kind of flipped the page and it appeared as though it was moving. And they were called, what were they called?
I was going to say Fuglies, but that's not right.
Not quite that.
It was
But
something.
yeah.
I don't remember.
And he did name them something, but it to have been so young and to create that in that stop motion manner, I think was really ahead of his time.
Yeah.
Well, after you got into the accident, was that when your parents separated? That same year?
It was close to it. It was close to it, within 2 years of that.
Okay. And then maybe a few years later, your mom was having some mental issues. She was going in and out of psychiatric hospitals?
I don't.
No?
Our mom had some mental health issues.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
she did.
Oh, did that cause the breakup between your parents?
No.
No? Okay. Because I know that he was closer to his mom than his dad, like in the early days, or
No.
about the same?
He was closer, so back in the late 60s and early 70s, our household was similar to a lot of others in that our dad worked in corporate. Our mom was a stay-at-home mom for the most part. And then she went and started working part-time for the telephone company.
Mhm.
And so they had a life where, or the way the household was structured was where our mom was, the stay-at-home mom, and she would take us to, as Jeanine said, to museums and that kind of thing. And our dad worked a lot.
Mhm.
And they, like 50% of the population, divorced or separated
Right.
back then. So in terms of the reasons why, I don't know.
Mhm.
People, don't stay together.
Yeah.
My mother did have mental health issues, and there at that time in our world history, there was a stigma attached to it. So even right now, I feel a little uncomfortable with the question, but I'll answer it.
I understand.
And yes, she did have mental health issues. It had nothing to do with them breaking up. They just broke up because they did.
Got it. Okay. And then you guys moved to Puerto Rico in 74,
We did, with our dad.
73, yeah.
73.
Mhm.
Sorry. And you guys lived out there for like a couple of years
Yeah, two and a half years.
Yeah.
and then came back to Brooklyn.
Mhm. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. So then you guys come back to Brooklyn, and right around 76, when he was around 16 years old, Jean-Michel ran away from home.
He did.
Okay. Knowing him the way you do, what led up to that? Because that's a pretty big deal, especially as a teenager.
Jean-Michel was an artist, and he wanted to paint. And the city in the 70s was very exciting and alluring. And by the city, I mean New York City. And he had communities of friends, and they were all, creating together and separately. And, their friendships were around that.
Mhm.
And so that's what he did.
Right. And he actually slept on park benches in Washington Square Park during that time.
He couch surfed.
Yeah.
He did. And it wasn't like he left and then he'd come home, and it was, kind of a back and forth thing. Here's the story. Our father, we're first generation.
Yes.
And our father had our father, Gerard Basquiat,
Yeah.
had a very specific idea of what he wanted for his family.
Mhm.
He came to this country to live the American dream. And at the time, the American dream was white picket fence, a dog, a cat,
Right.
blah, 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 3 children,
Not to be an artist. Exactly.
and to go work in
Corporate America.
in corporate America.
Yeah.
Our dad was a controller. He was very successful at what he did. He was a finance guy. And what he wanted and what he envisioned was that we would follow in those very traditional footsteps.
Mhm.
Jean-Michel was an incredibly, as you can see, and as we all know, an incredibly creative person.
Yeah.
And he was very committed to being an artist. Always wanted to be one, wanted to express his creativity and intended to, however he was able to do that. Our dad came to this country at a very young age himself and left his family and had a very clear idea that he proclaimed about what it was that he wanted to do with his life. He was going to be an American businessman. That was his deal. So you have that, and then you have his son, who also had a very clear idea of how he wanted to live. There was conflict there. Absolutely. So we're not denying there was conflict, right? And as they were navigating that conflict, the way that it played out was Jean-Michel leaving home because he was going to paint, because for him, it wasn't about going to school and getting great grades. It was about exploring his art. And that's what he chose to do. Right. So there was discomfort in that. It took a while to kind of figure out their relationship. And there had to be some acceptance and some forgiveness and all of that. And unfortunately, because I know you're going to get there, Jean-Michel passed away in the middle of this process that happens in many, many, many families. And so that is the story. So within that, there was some pain, there was forgiveness, there were arguments, there were disagreements. And then Jean-Michel died. And our parents lost their son. And my mother did have mental health issues. Right. And losing her son, you know, that is a stressful situation, which if you know anything about mental health, stress exacerbates those issues. So that is our family. What is also within our family is a very strong dedication to family and to our family and to having the back of our family, which is what Jeanine was describing before in terms of this exhibition and the work that we're doing to manage Jean-Michel's estate, which is really all about protecting Jean-Michel's legacy, keeping people focused on the amazing life that he had, the amazing work that he put out into the world, and the incredible way that he's been able to inspire generations of creatives during his lifetime and in the 30-something years since he's passed away. And that's a pretty badass thing for one little human being from Brooklyn to do, because we're sitting here 30-something years later in front of a 43-foot painting, New Nile, and I don't know how many feet, but it's big as heck.
Massive.
Yeah, so for us, we want to celebrate his life. We know there's a story. We know people are very interested in like some of the nitty-gritty kind of details, and we can appreciate that. But let's focus on the real thing, which is how inspired people are by Jean-Michel Basquiat.
Fair enough. Like I said, no disrespect intended. You know, I mean, when I do my, research, I try to get into the nitty-gritty sometimes, but I fully respect what you guys are doing and whatever you guys don't want. We have a space here. We don't feel disrespected at all. We're good. Okay. So you guys came back to the U.S. and around age 17, he came up with the same old theme. And it was based on like a religion that he considered like a fake religion in a way, like a faux religion.
I think a lot of it was him being, what's the word? His sarcasm.
Right.
About
same old is short for same old shit.
Same old shit.
Okay. And he started hitting the streets and kind of drawing this. Would you guys see this as you're walking around Manhattan?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, he was very excited about it.
I mean, these days you see a lot of artists, you see like the Obey all over the place, but he was the first one to really do that, the sort of repetition of, let me put out this kind of theme over and over again and kind of put it all over the city. And he really established a following with that, but people didn't exactly know who he was back then.
Yeah. He kind of created the first social media posts, where it's just like a sentence or, something he had, something shocking. Right.
And at one point, he was going to school, and I guess there was a prank that he pulled on the principal, and he got kicked out of school.
Yes.
Was there a problem with, because I'm an immigrant as well. And I remember my family, when I told them I'm going to become a full-time DJ.
So there you go. You get
my mom hated the idea. She said I was wasting my life.
Where are you from?
Well, I was born in the Ukraine. It used to be Russia. It used to be the USSR at the time. I came over when I was 5 years old. I grew up in the Bay Area.
Okay.
And
So you're first generation.
I'm actual immigrant.
That's
Yeah,
right. Okay,
I'm an
if you
actual,
came with five. Got it.
an actual immigrant, exactly. So I can understand the situation. I can understand the parents. You know, I mean, I went to Berkeley and I had a computer science degree, and suddenly I said, I'm going to be an artist instead. And my parents had no idea why the hell I was doing this.
Right.
So I could relate to the situation. So when your brother got kicked out of school, how did your dad react to it?
You know what, to be honest, I don't remember. I was, we were, young. There was a 7-age year difference between Jean-Michel and I. He just went on to the next school.
He wasn't
I
happy.
believe to City-ass school after that.
Well, that happened at City Ass.
Yeah, that happened it was like a
No, I
shaving
thought it
cream.
was Murrow.
Morrow. No,
I have it as a City-ass school.
Okay.
yeah, I think it was at Morrow. I'm sorry, it was at City Ass.
Yeah.
Our father wasn't happy. I mean, who would be, come on, you're in high school and this is happening. And,
Right.
our father is kind of like wringing his hands, like, how is this guy going to pay his rent? And, because at the time, again, like the success was going into corporate. And so for him, what he always wanted was to make sure that we would be able to take care of ourselves and be self-sustaining. That was a huge value in our family. So for him, it's like, if you're getting kicked out of high school, what's this guy going to do? He's going to be
Right.
living on the streets. And then he's like, no, I'm leaving. And he's like hanging out on friends' couches and on park benches and hanging out. I mean, that is frightening, for a parent to witness, where there's no basis for comparison. There's nothing to compare that life to. For you to be, in the 70s with dreadlocks as a Black guy talking about, I'm going to be a painter. Like, painters at that time, it was a very painting, and the art world was a very different looking place.
Did the dreadlocks happen in high school?
No, it wasn't that early.
A
It
little bit
was
later?
a little bit later. Maybe it was about 20.
Oh, okay.
I don't
Gotcha.
remember how old he
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
I don't remember how old he was.
Okay. Well, in 1978, after he had been doing the same old as an alternative to God, the Village Voice actually did a whole article on him.
Rene Record.
Exactly. Was that sort of his first kind of break into the media world? Going from like a street artist to actually being recognized by media?
I guess you can say that. Yeah, I think, the Village Voice is very like, underground. This is what's going on in the world.
In New York.
But I guess looking back on it, it could be considered his first break in the media world.
I think so.
Okay. And then he went from spraying with a spray paint can to actually going to canvas. And his first piece he sold to Debbie Harry,
That's
That's the story.
that is a
For
story.
$200.
Cadillac Moon,
That's the
in
story.
1981 for $200. Probably worth about $20 million today if we're lucky.
Yeah.
If not, that would probably be a bargain.
That doesn't go on sale.
She still owns that piece?
No,
I don't think
no.
so.
Oh, she sold it?
There are so many people kicking themselves.
Right. And then you kind of start seeing him sort of in the mix in the New York kind of new age, whatever you would call it, because he actually showed up in the Rapture video as the DJ.
Yes.
I never
Yes.
knew this. I
wasn't
clearly
supposed
remember
to
this
be.
video.
Yeah, it
Oh
was
man,
supposed
Fab
to be
Five Freddy's in it. And
Yeah,
I remember that was a very pivotal.
Grandmaster Flash.
Yeah, it's supposed to be
Yeah.
Grandmaster Flash.
Mhm.
Exactly. And this was, hip hop was still sort of coming along, and this was the first, she's sort of rapping,
Mhm.
and she
Yep.
was kind of incorporating the hip hop kind of theme.
Yep.
And your brother was really, not only was he painting, but he was also doing music
Mhm.
as well. The Ramalzi
Ramalzi.
record, which he worked on the record and he also did the cover.
He produced and he did work on the record cover. Yes.
And Tartown Records was his company. He produced it on his own label.
Well, and then his pieces just started blowing up. He just started, the pieces, that he started to sell just kept going up and up and up. And by the mid 80s, he was essentially the highest earning artist of that day.
Was he?
I don't know, to be honest.
Now, in terms of your relationship with him, you said there was a couple of years where he didn't come home, but then he came back and said, hey, I did this. I'm successful at it.
Yeah, we saw him. It wasn't like he disappeared or no one saw him. Like, we saw him, but it was he didn't live at home.
Right.
Yeah.
Were you realizing how big he was getting in the art world?
We were young. For us, we knew he was he was an artist.
Right.
And he always, that was what he was doing. But we didn't really, it's like any other sibling. It's not like, I always say this, it's not like he was walking around the house with a beret or telling us how much he was selling paintings for. It was just observing.
Because I would say I was a young teenager at the time. I was probably 13, 14 years old.
Right.
I knew that he had become the painter that he wanted to be. He traveled a lot because he would go to, exhibitions overseas. So, and we would go to some of the openings that he had. Mm-hmm. So we recognized it, but I don't think we really had the capacity to understand how large he had become.
Well, right. We talked about how the Village Voice did an article on him, but then on February 10th, 1985, New York Times Magazine did a whole feature on him.
That's right.
It's called New Art, New Money, The Marketing of an American Artist.
Yes.
Yeah.
And by that time, he was making $1.4 million a year.
You know more than us. We were not checking for his checkbook.
No, but I'm saying he was really a rock star by this point.
He was like the first, if I may have this fact wrong, but he was, I think, the first Black man ever on the cover, Black person ever, or person of color, on the cover of the New York Times Magazine. We actually have a signed copy, a copy that he signed to our dad as part of the exhibition in the studio gallery. That was a big deal. It was a huge deal.
For him, for my dad.
Yeah. What was some of the highlights for you guys during this time when he was because he was also doing runway shows, he was...
Comme des Garçons and...
Right, exactly. And he was doing these exhibits, not just in New York, but Europe, all over the world. He was really, and you also, you didn't see any Black painters that even remotely were at this level. He completely broke that glass ceiling.
He did.
And was there, 'cause I remember there was I'd read something there where it was he was extremely successful and he was, loved in the art world, but he would go outside and he couldn't get a cab sometimes. Right. Or he would go into an art gallery and they would recognize him. They would ask him to leave.
Yes.
Was that something that he kind of was bothered by?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Jean-Michel dealt with, his Blackness and racism since he was young.
Yeah.
He dealt with it when we lived in Puerto Rico. As you say, he would try to get cabs and he was not able to. It's the reason why we have the bicycle. That was his bicycle, and that's the symbolism of him riding around town because he couldn't get a cab.
Well, because he had the dreadlocks back then, and unless you knew him.
Correct. And he would even have friends hail cabs for him, and as soon as he put his hand on the door, they would pull off. So it's something that he dealt with his entire life. And he had to navigate in this world that was very homogeneous. And I think that was very difficult for him at times.
And also, I just want to add something to it, if it's okay. The bike, it's interesting because you have the bike and it's in front of his studio at Great Jones. So he's in there creating all this art and creating this life. And he has a bike because of that. And even the fact that during this conversation, that it was because he had dreadlocks, even that, that's so much a part of what's happening in this world that who gives a crap what he, and I'm not talking about you, but just this general idea that, and I think that was some of what our dad was struggling with, where if you're a creative and you have dreadlocks or you're expressing who you are, your identity in some way that's outside of this homogeneous kind of norm, it in some way or another makes you almost responsible for the prejudices against you.
Yeah.
There was nothing aggressive about Jean-Michel
at all.
Right? So if a person had the ability to see beyond their own ideas of what a Black man with dreadlocks was about, they would see a very soft-spoken, creative, warm-hearted human being.
Yeah.
And so he navigated that, and to navigate that as he's also on this incredibly upward trajectory of his career, There was a lot of pressure there for him.
But when you look at some of the artwork, like for example, one of the pieces has two cops beating a black man.
Mm-hmm.
And you see this in a lot of his works.
Jailbirds.
But was that something he experienced himself? Or is this just things that he saw moving around New York?
More of things that he saw,
Yeah.
Definitely. I'm not going to say that he had a lot of physical interactions with police officers, but there was a time in New York City where police were very aggressive.
Oh, yeah. During the 80s, the Giuliani time, the whole crackdown. And
Even before that, Cuomo
Yeah.
back then, right? And so, Michael Stewart was an artist like Jean-Michel, and he, was beaten to death by police officers in New York.
I heard about that.
It's also the topic of Herring's painting,
Yeah.
the one that they cut out of the wall. And so there was a lot of that happening in the city. New York City was very different back then. It was gritty.
Yeah.
There was like the Upper East Side and, Central Park West. And then there were these grittier parts.
Right. Times Square was gritty back then.
Very.
It's not the Times Square of today.
No,
not
it was
at all.
not like, people walking around with cameras and, selfie sticks.
It was dangerous.
It was dangerous.
Right.
It was gritty. And it was, there were a lot of outlaws, the police and people. It was a tough time.
When you watch the Basquiat movies, you kind of see a strained relationship with his father. But from what I understand, that's not exactly accurate. Like, I'm talking about as he became a superstar and so forth.
So, there are many photographs where you will see, we have one in our catalog where you could see that there was a lot of respect and love there. I think what you need to understand is I think there's always a time where a parent and a child conflict because a parent always has their idea of what they want from their child, and their child has free will to do what it is that they want to do. And so once they got to that, that reckoning and realized that this was the right path for Jean-Michel, their relationship was renewed and a good one. And there was a lot of love there.
There was a lot of respect. And then also, our dad was a businessman. And so Jean-Michel's like an artist. And our dad is like, I want to come in and help you. And Jean-Michel's like, nah, I got it. But that's like, that is what happens.
Yeah.
That is the relationship sometimes between parents and children. And I think, again, there are some things that people do a little bit differently today that are different from the way things happened before. Again, there was no Jean-Michel Basquiat that Jean-Michel could point to to say, listen, this has happened before, I can do it. He was pioneering.
Yeah, he was the first.
He was the first.
Yeah. Well, August 12th, 1988, he passed away.
He did.
From a heroin overdose. Did you know about the drug use leading up to this, or were you guys not really open to that part of his life?
I knew Jean-Michel smoked weed.
We all smoke weed. I smoke weed.
Right. I did not know that I didn't know that.
Yeah.
You can answer. Yeah, I did not know that. I knew that he was in a dark place and that he was struggling with the fact that he was becoming more and more successful.
Right.
And that put him in a position of having to really consider his community and the ways that people were responding to him. So as he accelerated, he became more and more alone in that. And then a person that he had a relationship with who was very supportive to him, because it's important when you're doing something to have other, community is really important. Andy Warhol was a friend of his and he passed away. And Jean-Michel was also working through his own maturity and evolution. And so he was in a dark place. He was in a sad and dark place for himself, for sure. But I did not know that he was, that's a scary word.
When you guys got that phone call, what went through? What went through in terms of your emotions?
Shock.
Yeah, I can only
I
imagine.
don't think it's a phone call that you ever want to receive.
Yeah. He was only 27 at the very height of his career, and still a trajectory that was still going up.
Mm-hmm. Just shock. I mean, shock. It's like a phone,
Well, there was a private funeral that was held on August 17th, 1988. Keith Haring came. Francisco Clemente came. Glenn O'Brien came. Art dealer Jeffrey Deitch. He gave the eulogy.
Mm-hmm.
How hard was that funeral to attend? Because he was so young. I mean, mid-20s.
I think as hard as you can imagine to lose your brother.
And to watch your parents lose their child. It was hard.
Well, your brother had no will. So therefore, your mother and father got 50% of his estate. And your father, being the businessman that he was, he basically made it his life's work to take over everything that, in terms of his legacy.
No, I need to correct you.
Is that correct?
Our father, being the parent that he was, claimed his son's legacy, went around collecting his artwork. He ensured that whatever was out there got completed, and he claimed the belongings of his son. And
At the same time,
working
a corporate job.
working a full-time corporate job. And he went into his son's life and made sure that whoever owed him was held accountable, whether or not they chose to take that offer of accountability. It's a long story. There's stories around that, but he stepped in to make sure that it was very clear that Jean-Michel had a father. Now, he also had a business background. So, of course, his approach is going to be, what do you owe my son? The accounts receivables are still, you don't get to keep it. This is not an opportunity for people to now, completely use Jean-Michel and all of that. So, yes, and he was a businessman, but it was about protecting his son and ensuring that his son's legacy was respected.
So there was an interview with Stephen Torton, who was Jean-Michel's assistant. And he said that your dad did an incredible job making sure that his son's work was not sold cheaply. You could not publish anything that included Jean-Michel without his approval. He went through everything. He went through movie scripts. He went through licensing. And he really said that your dad was the reason why Jean-Michel's work is at the level that he's at right now. He didn't just take any offer. He saw the value of what he had, what his son had created. And now, like I said, this is the most expensive American artist in history at this point. When you saw, obviously Jean-Michel was extremely popular while he lived, but after he passed away, the work just went crazy. When you saw that happen, how did you feel?
It's a mix of emotions, to be honest. In one way, you're proud about it. You wish that Jean-Michel was here to see it. But at the same time, it doesn't, for us, there's a different value to the work. And it's not about the monetary value. What that signified to us is that there was a person that was willing to spend that amount of money for a particular work. Doesn't mean that all the works will go for that. So, though we acknowledge the moment, it's not something that we kind of are talking about on a daily.
Yeah.
For us, it's really about the legacy and ensuring the integrity and the work, holding on to our collection and passing that down to future generations.
Right, because your dad was the chair of the committee that would review pieces that people claim to be Basquiat. So,
he created and led the authentication committee.
And from what I understand, there was hundreds of submissions every year of people, thousands. Right. If you had one, it was worth millions of dollars. If it wasn't authenticated, then it was worthless, essentially, for whatever that's worth. Because I remember there was a whole thing, it was called the Devil on the Door. You know what I'm talking about?
No.
Okay. There was a piece, I guess, in a bodega. It was like a painting of You want me to show you two real quick, or you
No.
don't really care? Okay, got it. Anyways, but there was a big debate over whether or not it was real or not, and ultimately they said it wasn't.
Yeah. So Lisane and I really didn't get involved in the authentication of works and the authentication committee.
Got it.
That actually was shut down way before my dad passed away.
Okay,
So it really isn't a topic that I think that we can speak to.
got it. So is there still an authentication committee or no?
No, the
Okay, so that's it.
authentication committee, they reviewed over 20,000 submissions over the period of, I don't know, 17 years or whatever. And the committee was disbanded in 2012.
Got it.
Because if you had a work and if you wanted it to be authenticated, there was a really large window to do it.
Right.
And that is really all
That's
there
over
is
now.
about that.
All right, because in 2008, Jeffrey Deitch actually wanted to get one of Basquiat's painting into Obama's White House.
Mm-hmm.
We heard that.
And he actually managed to get it there during the final Christmas in the White House.
Mm-hmm.
Quite an accomplishment. I mean,
Yes.
Amazing.
you know what I'm saying? Like, most of us didn't think we were going to have a black president growing up. And suddenly you have the first black president, and your brother's work
Yeah.
is in the White House
Right.
Right.
for the final Christmas of the first black president. I'm sure if your brother was alive, he would have gotten
He would
quite
be
a-
pretty
quite a
excited
kick out of
about
that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, in 2013, your dad passed away.
He did.
My condolences. My dad passed away as well.
Thank you.
I can imagine, what you guys went through. And he left a bunch of works to the both of you. And you guys took over the estate at
We
that
did.
point. You said something. You said, I think there was a time where I kind of wished our father did what they did in the movies, like sit us down with a whiteboard and say, this is everything. It didn't quite happen that way.
Mhm.
That said, I think that they were a lot more prepared than maybe we thought we would be.
I said that. Yeah.
Yeah. So you guys now took over the estate.
Yep.
And you guys were working corporate jobs and, the
Mm-hmm.
private sector and so forth. So suddenly you have this multi-billion-dollar estate that you now are taking over. How daunting was that to step into that?
It's funny. I don't know if the word daunting, I don't know if that is what I would call it. Basquiat's always rise to the occasion. We were always taught that, you're handed something and you dive, deep dive into it.
Mhm.
And so that's really what, how Lisane and I approached it. And every decision that we made, we really tried to take Jean-Michel into consideration and, try to think of him being in the room and would this be okay? Of course, it was overwhelming having our own private lives, but once we knew that there were a lot of things potentially for us to do, exhibitions and so on and so forth. But we knew that we needed to get our sea legs under us first before we started adding other things on our plate. So I think that we are in a good groove now. And it's what inspired us to decide that we wanted to do this exhibition, quite frankly.
And I think the other part of it, I'm just going to say it, we were born Basquiats. And so for us, if we were overly focused on the money aspect of it, if we were overly focused on that, it would be very difficult for us to accomplish the things that we're able to accomplish for Jean-Michel's legacy.
Mm-hmm.
Again, for us, we're not tripping on Basquiat. We are Basquiats. We're doing the thing that feels right to us, but we're not taking ourselves as Basquiats that seriously because that's not the thing, right? And for me personally, it would distract me if I was like, well, I'm a Basquiat, so blah, blah, blah. Like, that's not the conversation. Managing this estate together, we're making the decisions that we believe are the right decisions. We have Jean-Michel in mind when we're doing it. We have everything that we've learned, from our dad, from Jean-Michel, from our mom. Our mom also passed away in 2008.
My condolences.
Thank you. And that's really where our head is at, because that is the way that we're able to create the things that we're able to create and to share Jean-Michel's legacy with the world, is by staying very, very focused. And I'm saying that really more to people who have this idea that because you're managing this estate and because the value of Jean-Michel's works is what it is, that somehow or another, we're just kind of like, sitting back somewhere having mimosas. Are we drinking mimosas? Maybe. But we're doing it while we're working.
Yeah.
We work really, really hard. Really, really hard. And I have other businesses and she has other things. And, this is a big thing we're very aware of and humbled by the enormity of Jean-Michel's presence within popular culture. Very clear on that. And at the same time, also very clear that there's a long game here.
Well, in 2017, Basquiat's skull sold for $110,500,000 at Sotheby's, making the 6th most expensive sale ever at that time. I'm sure if that skull came up at auction again, it'd probably be about $250 million, if not more. In 2021, Beyonce and Jay-Z did a Tiffany campaign with Basquiat's painting, Equals Pi, in the background. Is that something you guys authorized?
Well, they do have to get copyright from us.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. So that was something you guys were personally involved in.
We were asked for, you mentioned it earlier in the interview about, there are certain protocols in business. Again, people are like, oh, it's just painting. There's things that you do to protect your trademarks and your copyrights and the rights, Jean-Michel's rights as an artist. That's really what our role is. It's to protect his rights. And so we did give permission. We absolutely approved that. Yeah.
Some of the critics say that they had a problem with that because they didn't feel that he would endorse a luxury brand like Tiffany.
Really? You mean the man who wore Armani and who walked Comme des Garçons in Paris and who drank sake and who, is that the person that
Fair enough.
Oh, what would he be doing?
There you go.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay.
I love that answer. So then we get to where we are today, which is the King Pleasure exhibit. Why that name, King Pleasure?
The name King Pleasure because King Pleasure was a bebop singer, artist, and he sang the song Moody's Mood for Love. Jean-Michel drew a painting called King Pleasure.
Okay.
And Moody's Mood for Love is a song that we listen to every night. Frankie Crocker ended his, of WBLS, ended his set playing that record. And it was something that we heard every night with our dad. Our dad loved the song. We loved the song. So just kind of the combination of the name of the artist, the fact that Jean-Michel created that painting, the song that we, grew up listening to, Jean-Michel, his crown, King, it just seemed really, really appropriate for, for Jean-Michel and how he chose to live his life.
And Jean-Michel also, he had fun. Like he painted 24/7, 365, but he also really enjoyed his life. He loved music. He loved to party. He loved food, great food. He loved to travel. And so he really enjoyed his life. Pleasure was important to him.
And all of these pieces all come from the estate, from your personal collection, except for one piece that your stepmom, which was the last piece that he actually painted, right? That's on loan for this exhibit.
She's our stepmother.
Yeah, exactly.
So
yeah,
she's
I know it's all in the family.
She's our stepmom.
Exactly.
Yeah. So all of the works, there are no loans from outside of the family. Yeah.
And none of these are for sale.
No.
These are all this is all part of your permanent collection.
Correct.
That's up on display. And as I walk around here, this is literally like a multi-billion-dollar collection that I'm looking at. It's just jaw-dropping. I didn't know a lot of these pieces even existed. As a Basquiat fan, my whole, not my whole life, but a good portion of my life, my jaw is just dropping, walking around, seeing this stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, that was the intention. Our stepmother said, we have all these works, they should be seen. And we agreed with her. Yeah. And we'd never curated a show before, but we had a particular vision. We knew what we wanted to share We knew the stories we wanted to share.
And what we wanted people to feel.
Yeah. We wanted people to have an experience as opposed to the typical gallery experience. And so we thought it was important to show the work.
Yeah. We're very proud of this project that we've done. We, have worked, we've made room in our lives for this. We do have sponsors for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And we executive produced, we're self-funded for this. And we've kept the price point for tickets as low as we possibly could. But we're we're paying this out of our pockets. And so we oftentimes get people who are like, why can't you just do it for free? And it's like, well, it costs, yes, you can talk about the value of the paintings, but we have a staff, we are paying rent, we're, buying Windex to clean the floor. It's not like we have this like foundation somewhere that's, doing this for us where we can offer tickets for free. We can't do that. And so what's for sale are the tickets,
right.
But the works are not for sale. That's not what this is about. This is about creating an experience for those folks who may feel intimidated by walking into a museum or walking into a white wall gallery to see artwork. We wanted to create something where families would feel comfortable coming in, enjoying the work, having the opportunity to, go in and out of galleries, sit outside, process the experience. For those who have a lot of questions about Jean-Michel and how he lived and what he did, we recreated our childhood, 2 rooms of our childhood
That was
home.
incredible, by the way.
Thank you.
Seeing the living room and the dining room. And this is where you guys grew up.
95% of what's in those 2 rooms is actually the stuff from our home.
Was that chilling? Like actually walking by your old
It's fun. It's fun,
childhood living room?
As we were putting this together, like toward the latter part of it, Jeanine and I would like sit on the couch. It's not the original couch. The upholstery is redone.
Right.
And we would just sit on the couch. That table was in our living room and we just kind of sit there and talk or whatever. And we wanted to create this experience where people could come in, experience Jean-Michel, get some inspiration, also for families to understand that a creative support creative people. They may be doing something different from what is expected, but support them. And so there's a lot.
And see themselves
in it.
In our family.
Yeah.
I was talking to one of your team members as he was showing me around. He was saying that the Warhol piece that Andy Warhol did of your brother, you guys actually purchased that yourself.
No.
Nope, it's not true?
Purchased it?
No? Oh, okay. Was that part of the collection already?
Yep. Yeah.
Aha. So were there any plans at all to like purchase any of the Basquiats that have been in circulation and to bring them kind of into the master collection, or you guys are just good with what you have?
I think we're good with what we have for now.
Like, we're not on the hunt to find them or anything like that. I mean, who knows what happens in life, but that's not part of our strategic plan.
And any plans of actually selling off any of the pieces, or do you try to keep everything?
No. If you have followed our family for decades, we're not, no.
So what's next? I mean, this exhibit is incredible. We're starting to see, like the Tiffany's campaign I thought was really dope. I'm not one of the people who criticize it, by the way. I thought it was cool. And in fact, when I see Jay-Z, the first thing I think is, oh, he's kind of fashioning his look after your brother. I'll say it if no one else says
it. That's okay.
To see him in the campaign, it was like, oh, okay, I see where this is going.
Yeah. What's next for us is 6 months of rest.
6 months of rest.
Vacation.
What's next for us is, what are you doing while you're not on a Zoom call about the exhibition? What's next is, this has been an incredibly cathartic, healing, fun, challenging, and beautiful experience. And we have been knee deep in this while also juggling and managing the other parts of our lives since the summer of 2020. Every day. And it has been, I think we make it look easier than it actually is. And that we started this during the summer where the world was like off its axle. And so we never really processed that. We've just been going. And so for us, you know, January 1st is the last day that this exhibition will be up. We are not playing.
Well,
Okay.
it was extended. Wasn't it supposed
It
to
was
be October
extended.
15th?
October 15th. We
Right.
extended it. So January 1st is the last
That's
day.
it.
And that's it. That is it.
Packing it all
If
up.
you don't believe
Back in the
it,
warehouses.
yes.
Yes.
And then we're going to take a minute to rest and to refuel and to, you know, focus on whatever it is, and to, you know, to recharge and to also process this experience. It has been beautiful, beautiful.
And when we're ready to, you know,
figure it out. We'll
what the next step is, we will let our supporters, our followers know.
Yeah.
For sure.
Do you guys each have a favorite piece? Is there like one painting in particular that's like that?
every day.
Every
mine.
day there's a different
It's
one.
yeah.
Oh, really? Just
every
kind of-
day there's a
Yeah.
different one.
I like this morning. I'm thinking about hot water, Asening. I never get the name of it completely, but it's almost like a family tree. It's in the 1960 gallery, and it's a drawing, a very simple drawing, but it's Jean-Michel almost drawing out our family tree, both sides of the family. And it just reminds me of like hydrants, water hydrants in Brooklyn, and it reminds me of when we were younger.
Yeah. I'd say for me today would be another drawing within the same gallery. And it's very simple. It's a piragua cart.
Wow.
Piragua is kind of like a snow cone in a lot of Hispanic communities.
Oh, right.
And it's shaved ice, and they put flavored syrup on it.
yeah.
It's all sugar.
And it is sugar.
Right.
And it's something that we had in when we lived in New York, as well as when we lived in Puerto Rico.
It'd be like the Spanish version of an Italian ice, I guess,
Right.
you know. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much
Thank you.
for sharing your story. I've been a long time fan. And the thing about Basquiat is that when you look at it, there's no confusing as to who
Yeah.
drew that.
Yeah.
It's so unique and it's so different that, you know, I remember watching documentaries and the art dealers were like, yeah, as soon as we put it up, it wasn't hard to sell. Everyone wanted them, you know, just right off the bat. It's not something
Yeah.
you have to ease into or
Yeah.
have to see 1,000 times in order to like. As soon as you saw it, it was just so drastically different than any other art piece out there.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's influenced so many people to this day. You see so many baby Basquiats, you know, and I'm not going to name any names, but
Yeah.
you see so many these days, and people like to call it street art or whatever else. But your brother was the originator of all this. And when you look at these pieces, it just reinforces how much of a genius he was and how much work he had.
Yeah.
Because as I walk around, you know, like the pieces in this room I've never seen before.
Mm.
You know, a few pieces as I walk, oh, okay, I've seen a print of this. Oh, I've seen this before. No, but 90% of it is brand new. So thank you so much for digging into the warehouse and pulling this out and showing it to people, because I think it's going to have such an effect. And, you know, and your brother, you know, in terms of African-American painters, he not only broke the glass ceiling, but he shattered it and went off into space
Yeah.
Yes.
with it.
Yeah.
And, you know, I know that so many kids, you know, that didn't think that this could be a real career. They're just doodling
Exactly.
in their rooms and thinking, okay, well, I'm just going to do this for fun. But then my dad wants me to go get a college degree and do computers. They see your brother and say, no, I could actually follow my dreams and become embraced and to support myself. Because being a working painter is probably in the arts, probably the hardest genre to, you know, to really make a living. And unfortunately, you get, you know, everyone loves you after you pass away. Suddenly your work's triple, quadruple, 10 times in price, which makes it even harder
Right.
in this
Right.
genre.
And the supplies are expensive,
Right.
you know, so it's not easy.
It's not easy.
Yeah. I think also one of the things about Jean-Michel that was so unique is that he had that mix of creative genius and also business acumen, because I think that's what's really important as well. Unfortunately, a lot of times people who are creatives are like, well, I'm just creative and I don't want to focus on the business, which is fine. But I think that was one of the things that really helped him, is that he had the balance of both. There was, he was strategic about what he was doing. And he also worked really hard,
Right. I mean, your collection, have you ever counted the number of paintings that you
Nope.
guys have? No,
We're not talking about
no
that.
idea.
We're not discussing that.
A lot. Though.
We're not discussing it. We're not, Vlad.
Listen, I'm just in awe. I'm just in awe, and I'm a fan. This is why I'm saying it. Like, I'm interested to
Thank
see
you.
how many more pieces will, at one point, be displayed that I could enjoy, because these are amazing. I remember being at Russell Simmons' old house, and he had one of the originals of the Basquiat Warhol collab, the one with the horse. You know what I'm talking about?
There were a lot of them. Yeah.
Yeah,
I know what
and I remember walking by. He had it like in the stairway, so no sunlight would touch it. You know what I'm saying? But I walked by and I'm like, was that Basquiat? What? Where am I right now? But you have so many fans of your brother's work, and thank you so much for displaying it. I love this exhibit, and I want everyone to come see it before January.
There was a time when I used to feel like I'd be a little bit like, they're copying Jean-Michel. And I'd be all like, ugh. But now I see it differently, where it's like, there are a lot of, I'm not talking about copying Jean-Michel's work, but to be inspired by it. It's really overwhelmingly beautiful to see how many artists are inspired by him. And you can kind of see him, coming through them, or the fact that he inspired them coming through into their work. I think it's really beautiful. He did a great thing.
I
did
agree.
a great thing.
Well, thank you so much for sharing, and looking forward to what you guys have in the future.
You're welcome.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
You're welcome.
Peace.